welcome to Byte Live 2020, This is Progress. My name is Izzy Ashton and I'm the Deputy Editor of Byte at Creative Brief. Although this year is unlike any other, marked by pervasive global uncertainty, our event series this year is determined to celebrate inclusive industry leaders, stereotype-busting campaigns, and the hope that a new generation of creatives bring. The conversation we're having today is examining how establishing communities in the workplace can drive D&I, foster positive culture, and lead to business success. So I'd just like to welcome our speakers today. First up, we have Natalie Narh, who is Vice Chair of Ogilvy Roots and Social Content Creative. Ogilvy Roots is dedicated to championing greater ethnic and cultural diversity within the advertising industry and its creative output. Natalie was also enlisted on the Empower Top 100 Ethnic Minority Future Leaders list and is the founder of Latch Productions, a company dedicated to shaping how creative visions are accessed and assessed through various skill sets in media. So welcome, Natalie.
Thank you.
Joining Natalie is Sarah Duggan, co-chair of Ogilvy Equals, creative copywriter and sustainability activist. The Equals community is about furthering equality across the industry and society, inviting all genders to take action and join the conversation, because, as Sarah has said, we'll never get anywhere if we're stuck in an echo chamber. So welcome, Sarah. And alongside Natalie and Sarah, we have Gabi Field, who is head and founder of Ogilvy ReWired and junior strategic planner. Gabi joined the agency on their first intake of apprenticeships in 2018 and founded ReWired less than a year into the role. Through ReWired, Gabi is keen to help craft a narrative to allow people to better understand and celebrate neurodiversity. So thank you all so much for being here today. So whether it's exploring race, diverse minds, or equality, Ogilvy's internal platforms have been designed to lift up voices within the agency that might not otherwise have been heard. So Sarah, if I could kick off with you, could you maybe talk a little about the importance of creating spaces where people feel empowered to speak up?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just important, it's vital. Like, the bottom line is, if people don't feel safe, they just don't speak up. And I think some people still see the idea of a safe space as somewhere you go to get away from things, like the big scary things. And actually, I think the way we embrace it is it's somewhere you go to really get into things, like really nut down on those details and what's going on. So it's somewhere you can openly like have those awkward conversations without any fear of repercussion, and really delve into the issues that you're experiencing and find out why people feel that way. Because if you don't find out why people are feeling that way, like, those are the triggers that we can react to and find a way forward for. And I think what's lovely is our agency culture feels like now built around this idea that everywhere is a safe space. Like, the way that we're integrating all our policies and our networks and everything really makes it feel like everyone's got a voice and everyone's encouraged to use it. So having kind of peer-led networks is a huge part of that, because it can be quite scary. Like, even as progressive as we are, like, you know, the average member of staff isn't necessarily going to go up to a CEO and go, hey, I'm not happy about this. So having our networks being peer-led, that opens it up so that if you do have an issue or you find something's not right, the person you go and speak to is somebody that you've had a chat at the coffee machine with or a cocktail upstairs with. Like, it's peer-to-peer, and that's a really important thing in terms of creating this kind of safe space. And I think the other important thing is to focus on what you do after you have those conversations. Like, it is all well and good having conversations where people highlight issues and problems and things we can do better, but you need to actively show people that those conversations don't just happen and then go into the void. Like, when you start bringing that into your culture and showing it being actually physically done in the day-to-day, it gives everybody a kind of greater understanding and reassurance that it's not just wafty conversations for the sake of a bit of box ticking, that it actually is things that translate into the everyday way that businesses run. And I think that's so important, so that people feel, because if people see that happening, they feel empowered to speak up for themselves.
Yeah, definitely. So that kind of really, like, actions following words rather than just sort of words sort of floating out into the ether, I guess.
Absolutely. It's all about like, don't just say, because you never get anywhere. Like, everyone can have lots of well-meaning conversations, but until you actually start putting those into action plans that are visible, like, nothing changes.
Totally.
So like, openness and collaboration is really key to that. Like, there's no criteria to join a network at Ogilvy. Like, anyone with a passion for change can have their say and do their bit to like steer us all in the right direction. It's a very open system, which I think is why it works so well. Like, you can be fearless, and for me that's true inclusion, because everybody from like an intern on day one to top level management has a say and has a voice and can have that conversation.
Yeah,
So that's
definitely.
been like a huge part of driving change. I think like Gabi, like as you just mentioned, like Gabi was in her internship still and she founded a whole new network. Like where else
Yeah.
would you get the kind of support where somebody that's entry level will be listened to and heard? And I think that's the real reflection of inclusion. Like everybody has a say.
Yeah, definitely. And that's sort of what I wanted to come, that sort of leads quite nicely on, actually, because I guess Gabi, sort of at the heart of ReWired is a desire to make the invisible visible. So in a world in which making noise feels like the only way to be heard, how can businesses lift up every voice?
I think it definitely leans into kind of what Sarah said about having not just kind of these siloed safe spaces, but everything being safe space, and redefining what a safe space actually is. Like a safe space should be a place where you can talk about your opinion and people will listen to your opinion, and and that willingness to listen to others helps drive people to make these everyday changes and to help other people out. I think as well, though Sarah already kind of touched on this a bit, but having networks be so peer reviewed, it means we're nutting down onto what the actual issues are from the perspective of our employees. So if people need more, say, requirements and stuff, they don't have to feel afraid to sort of ask for these extra requirements, because it actually betters the business. Being able to, share what you can do to help each other, as well as just regular how a routine should work, can massively impact the business. And fearlessness is definitely the right word for it, I think. Like, you shouldn't feel, you should all be unapologetically who you are, and I think Ogilvy is a very, very true champion of that.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. And I guess sort of Natalie, coming to you, Ogilvy Roots is focused on the importance of ethnic and cultural diversity within the industry. So could you maybe talk about how it's kind of set out to Ogilvy Roots, that is, to shift the narrative?
Yeah, sure. So actually, as both Gabby and Sarah have said, it's definitely a case of any and everyone in Ogilvy who truly wants to make their voice heard to a very specific problem that they have. They always have the opportunity to do so. But then within the specific context of Roots, it's also grassroots led. So it was actually founded by 7 junior creatives and apprentices, actually. So they were all entry level and they all decided that this was something that was important to them. And once again, Ogilvy gave them the opportunity to actually build on that and create an entire network, which has also expanded across WPP as well. So now I think we've got over 20 Roots networks across the WPP network. So it's been like a really, really great initiative that started obviously at a grassroots level, but once again, it's impacting every level of the business. And within that, in terms of the narrative, we focus on the agency, the people within the agency, and then the actual work that we create. And I guess all of those pockets then contribute to the wider creative industry in general. And an example of how we set out ways to shift the narratives is obviously back in June, the Black Lives Matter protest spiked up again. And within that, we hosted 2 workshops. So the first one was to, once again, provide a safe space for the Black community at Ogilvy to come in and talk about the emotions, or talk about ways that they wanted to see and act on change within the context of Ogilvy. And we realized that within that first session, of course, like most people were like showing their emotions and talking about how it had affected them and everything. But what we also noticed was most people were tired of talking about their emotions and they were ready for change. And once again, Ogilvy gave them the opportunity to do that with the wider workshop that we hosted with the rest of the agency, where we all came together and we literally brainstormed across 6 pillars. So on leadership, talent management, clients, the Black community, colleagues, and the last one was on external comms as well. So it was truly a collective effort in terms of bringing allies together to have one like coherent goal in terms of like eradicating all the other negative bubbles and pockets that exist in society. And obviously off the back of that, that's what actually made up the foundation of our Black History Month activities. So off the back of the workshop, that's how we ended up focusing on Black Pound Day, for instance, because we were focusing on, or one of the things that came up during the workshop was we should collaborate more with other Black organizations. So then we ended up working with over 20 Black artists, organizations, and everything else attached to that, which was great because in maybe 6 months prior to that, we wouldn't have anticipated having those kind of plans for Black History Month. But then because we as a Root to Network were empowered by the allies and the rest of the agency, we then had more confidence to set out all of those initiatives as well. So yeah, it's definitely a collective effort.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of going to be my next question, is that it really does feel like the initiatives within Ogilvy champion the power of the collective and of a community really supporting one another. Sarah, do you think this is an essential part of really sort of moving the needle when it comes to representation across the creative industries as a whole?
Absolutely. Like, I think we realized very early on that real change isn't going to come from the top down. It's not just from the top down, it's got to come from the front line. Like, we're the ones that are exposed to the issues every day, and we're the ones best placed to kind of spot those opportunities for change and bring them to the forefront. It's like, it's no one person's job to like solidify your diversity and inclusion strategy and the policies. Like, it does take that collective approach, and when you've got that collective in place, you cannot underestimate the time and energy it takes to shift that needle. Once you get going, like, you have to make time for discussion, you have to back initiatives to bring people together, and you have to fund them properly. And I think all too often, like, D&I strategies tend to be this kind of like burden almost of a small HR team. And it can't just be one person's like issue to deal with, because it affects everybody. And you can't expect a few friendly posters around the coffee machine to suddenly like re-engineer your like company's DNA when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So it does take an army of allies, like, to re-engineer a culture. It takes an army of allies to fight a big battle like this. I think what we've been developing at Ogilvy is that army of allies, as sort of Nat pointed out. We're creating this kind of common consciousness that just floats around through everything we do. Like, everybody seems to be on the same like rhythm now in terms of we can do better, we will do better. And we know that as an industry, the culpability we have in terms of what we push out into the world, like, can change everything. Like, we can, you know, the work we do as advertisers like goes into the kind of fabric of society and becomes a status quo. So like, we need to be cognizant of that, and we need to realize like the power that we've got as a collective, as an industry, not just an agency, to change that and actually make positive change. Because it sounds really obvious, but when you actually say it out loud, it is obvious. Like, you need a diverse range of people to represent a diverse range of people, because diversity and inclusion and everything, like, when you break it down, like, it's so intersectional. Like, no one person's one thing. So I think having all of our 5 networks working together to kind of be the basis of that really allows us to kind of have different lenses on lives and take deeper dives into issues and actually collaborate with the people that are being affected by that and kind of cross support each other. Because when everyone's on the same mission, you do have the power to affect that change, and it does become that common consciousness.
I love that idea of the common consciousness. It feels like that's kind of the way to sort of ensure that almost every story is told and every individual is valued, if you all kind of share that thought process.
It totally is. Like, the more people you've got with different radars, the more things are going to ping up on those radars. Like, I remember a couple of years ago now speaking to somebody that runs or helps run Ogilvy Proud, and he was sort of standing there with metal discs in his hand. I was like, what are you up to? And he said, getting gender neutral toilet signs installed. And at the time, I'd read a lot of stuff about that, and whether there was a need for it or not, and whether it was stigmatizing or the opposite. But he is coming from that community, so he knows how that's going to play out, and he knows the needs of those people. So having people that are well placed within those communities outside of work means that you've got people in the best place to then bring those tactics into the workplace. And I think that has a ripple effect as well, because it makes you think about things that aren't necessarily in your, like, the ball's not necessarily in your court, but you're aware that the game is being played. Like, because literally 2 days after that, I had a freelance writer friend of mine come in. She was picking up a brief, and she was going to be working from home. So she had an adorable little toddler with her. And we spent about half an hour looking for a meeting room that we could commandeer just for a couple of minutes to do a quick nappy change, because we just didn't have the facilities. And that made me feel like, hang on a sec, like, there's something really wrong about that. And literally, like, I raised it to our sort of head of people, and within 2 weeks, we had baby changing facilities on every major floor. We had a parent and child room to help parents returning to work and visiting parents, just so they can do basic things like pump milk in the middle of the day when they need to.
Well, that's the thing, I guess, until someone experiences it, you don't feel like you need to sort of put that in place. I remember reading a story about Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook, and the pregnancy parking bays were like the other side of the car park because no one had ever talked about it before. And the only reason she noticed because she became pregnant and realized that it was really exhausting to have to walk to the other side of the car park. So I guess you can't change the design unless you kind of empower people to speak up about it. And when it comes to sort of furthering the diversity, inclusion agenda, Gabi, what do you sort of see as the key challenges for the industry moving forwards, and how can we maybe come together better to drive change faster?
I think one of the biggest challenges for enforcing diversity inclusion can be familiarity, which is probably quite a weird thought process to have, but it's kind of like the idea that people will hire or like take on to new teams sort of thing, people that they kind of already know or maybe perhaps even looks like them. But unfortunately, there's this narrative right now where like this idea of the familiar automatically equals best, when that's not the case at all, because we need to review things like the hiring process or how we look at internal teams and even talent for casting calls, to kind of look at it and go, well, if you're hiring the same people, you're hiring the same ideas. So you're not going to get true diversity and inclusion with the same people, because it's just the same faces again and again. And then, because as well, it's not just a case of making sure that your company internally is happy and diverse, it also shows in the creative work that we produce, because it actually creates impact, because enough people, kind of like what Sarah said, there's enough people there to see change because they've experienced it, and to be able to notify what needs changing. And so actually having those diverse teams is essential, not just for Ogilvy as an internal, but also for our clients, which is really, really vital. So it's kind of, I think, a really big step for people is kind of be willing to be open-minded and kind of get out of the headspace of like, well, I've worked with this person before, like I know they're good, sort of thing. Like, while it might work for some campaigns, it might not necessarily work for others. And a lot of things we're trying to do a lot here at Ogilvy in regards to like improving, removing the familiar and getting more into the diverse realm of hiring. So we have blind applications, for example, and we're looking into ways to help clients think about what they could do when thinking of briefs that can be considered a D&I strategy.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I guess, Natalie, what would your advice be for sort of nurturing new talent, particularly kind of during the ongoing crisis, and also talent from sort of underrepresented communities, or perhaps, as to Gabi's point, those who don't feel familiar to those who are hiring? I guess that's the kind of fundamental issue, as Gabi just so brilliantly sort of highlighted.
Yeah, so it's literally like what Gabi and Sarah just said as well. So I always, it's always going to sound like, how Lady Gaga always says, if there were 100 people in the room and it only takes like one person to actually believe in you and hear you, it's the same thing across everything else. And for me, I think the three main things that is needed to establish more diverse talent is access, mentorship, and competence. And I literally saw a tweet yesterday that said people need more access than they do mentorship most of the time. And that's especially the case in these like strange times that we're living in, because you have a lot of people who have like the ability and the competence to do a job, but they just don't have the right people speaking for them in the room. So they don't have anyone speaking for them in any rooms at all. And I think the important thing to note as well is, obviously, in underrepresented communities, they have even less people vouching for them. And often they have the opportunity to actually think about what they want to do and where they want to go and how they want to get there. But then if they don't have the actual access, then that's not really going to add up to anything. And there was this interview on LinkedIn, I think it involved Carla Harris, and she's the vice chairman, I believe, of Morgan Stanley. But within that, she was also talking about access as well, and how, like, obviously at every like ranking of society, you have like some levels of nepotism. And obviously we all know about the negative connotations of, or the negative translations of nepotism. But on the other side of that, you also have the situation where if you have a mentor, they're able to properly understand what you bring to the table and the unique stories that you can then contribute to the wider narrative of whatever agency that you'd be working at. And sometimes, obviously, if you're coming from an entry level as well, it gets very hard for you to then have the spaces to articulate what you can bring to the table in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think at Ogilvy, with all the other programs that they have to bring in diverse talent, like the pipe, if it wasn't for the pipe, I don't know how I would have entered that building, you know? And they have so many other initiatives that speak to like diverse people and diverse ways of thinking. I think that's an important thing as well. And like Gabi mentioned, like if you don't have diverse people in the building, you're just gonna have the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
And like Gabi also mentioned as well, like the more standard your work feels, the more marginalizing it probably is, because it's been set up to shut out literally like so many pockets of people that people always have to, well, by people I mean the advertising industry, always have to go the extra mile to accommodate, whereas we should be moving to a space where we should be finding ways to truly assimilate them into society in general and then feed that into our work. But then, like I said, the advertising industry is a mirror to society. So if we don't always include diverse people and diverse ways of thinking, we're literally telling other people that they don't exist.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it.
No, that's a really good point, actually. And I think, Gabi, you've sort of spoken really eloquently about the need for equity to ensure equality, sort of give people what they individually need in order to thrive. Can you maybe just talk a little bit around this point? Because I think it builds quite nicely on what both Sarah and Natalie and you have kind of spoken about over the course of this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I love like that simple phrase, because I think it just really shows the point. Because I think if you want to, like Natalie said, if you want to truly represent society, you need both male and female, and ergo you need parents, and you also need BA, ME communities, and you need neurodivergent communities, and all of these people have sort of both different strengths and different hurdles that they'll have to come across to, do the regular work. And it's kind of allowing this open conversation with the people who they report to, whether it be your sort of talent management, your HR groups, or even like your line managers, like being able to sit there and have an open conversation and sort of discuss what you can do to kind of help improve your work. Either that's the case of like looking at like what Sarah did, like actually getting baby changing areas that are really, really helpful, or just having a discussion saying, hey, can I come in at 10 because I want to avoid the trains because they're really loud and trigger all the brain going everywhere. And I think being flexible is really, really helpful for both the business and for the employees, because it's kind of like a catch-22 where everyone benefits.
Yeah.
If you're just like willing to sort of accept these different requirements, and even be willing to accept that requirements will change as well. Like just having this open conversation and be allowing people to sort of be able to speak and say like, hey, I need a bit of help here. Be great if I could have this, and just being like, yeah, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we know this, we know you do the work, so I don't see why that's an issue, sort of thing. Like, and helping people just be the best people they can, because it's one of those things where, like, yes, like, it could be an autistic thing, for example, to want to avoid the trains at 10 a.m, but it also helps parents, for example, because they're probably doing the school run. It's one of those things where having this equity allows everyone to thrive, because different people benefit from the different sort of, I guess, the different flexibility that you can actually have with requirements.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, thank you for that. And I guess, so sort of finally, a question for all of you. I guess it's sort of, what's the one thing that people can do to be really proactive allies in the push for greater representation? So sort of a takeaway, if you will, for people to take back to their desks, kitchen tables, sofas, wherever their sort of office finds them at the moment. So Sarah, maybe if I could come to you first.
I think it's just take the power upon yourself. Like when I started all of this, I was not walking around thinking I'm a feminist, I want to be part of a network that's going to change some stuff. Like, but I did know that I was walking around thinking gender stereotypes really annoy me, and inequality is not on. And you're having these thoughts, but it took like just a candid chinwag at a coffee machine one day, and it happened to be with somebody that was involved with what was then Women of Ogilvy for me. And I was venting to a colleague and a friend, like, and she was like, well, hang on a sec, come and be part of this. So I guess when I started, I wasn't walking around thinking, oh, I want to do that and make a change, but it took somebody reaching out to me in a comfortable, safe space conversation to actually say, well, you could be part of that change. So now I would say to anybody out there listening, like, if something feels wrong, don't sit and wait for permission to make change. Like, if you can see a better way of doing something, take it to your people team, take it to your HR, take it to your line manager. Like, just look for opportunities to make change. When something annoys you, like, act on it. Like, nobody is going to turn you away. Like, you'll be surprised at how unalone you are in your thinking. It just takes somebody to say it out loud to start that ball rolling. And I would say, if you're management listening right now, to reiterate, like, make the time to have those everyday conversations about D&I and about like wellness in general. Like, encourage complaints, open the floor to ideas, and empower your staff. Because if you can build like a multi-level team like we have, whose energy and insight are going to make a real impact, people that are on the front line, like, give them the time, the funds, and the freedom to make change happen, and you will see that in the bottom line. Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, the more diverse, and as Gabi and Nat have said, the more diverse a culture you have, the better the work is going to be. And that's why clients should care. If nothing else, if they had no conscience, that's why people should care. Because a better world makes everyone happy and makes the work better, which means it resonates with the people that we need to reach. And it's no longer just black and white or here and there. Like, it's everyone everywhere that we need to be mindful of. I think Nat said it perfectly. Like, and it's something we say quite often, like, we do hold a mirror up to society, so everyone needs to be represented in that reflection, and that starts with empowering people that are going to be change makers.
Yeah, definitely. And Natalie, if I could come to you next.
Yeah. What I was going to say, it sounds really basic, but it starts at home. And I say that because regardless of how open-minded everyone might believe themselves to be, we all have forms of bias. And wow, this sounds really negative, but I'm going to say, like, humans in general, we're very selfish beings, and we only tend to care about things until we have experienced them ourselves. And we always have to, once again, go the extra mile to identify the barriers that other people have in society that we don't necessarily have ourselves. And I guess I'm saying all of this to say that one needs to be very introspective in terms of being an ally. In terms of allyship, it always has to start with introspection, because you always have to break down what your reality looks like and how that reality affects the people around you. And I think once we all come to the stage where we're able to truly be honest with ourselves and realize how things we might be doing might be affecting other people negatively, and once we establish that, then that's where the action comes. That's when all the conversations happen. And then that's when hopefully some form of change will happen in the end as well. But yeah, I would say the first step would always be introspection. Well, at least
Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice, actually. And Gabi, what would your piece of advice be for people wanting to be kind of proactive allies?
I would say listening would be a really, really big one, which kind of sounds a bit obvious, but I think there's a lot of narrative at the minute where people like can maybe feel a bit marginalized for just sharing their experience, but actually having people willingly sit there and listen really, really helps. And I think as well, to be an ally, you obviously don't need to have the lived experience of, say, what any of our networks represent. As long as you show like that it's something that you may have looked into, or even like you've gone to an event once and you think you could like do better, I think more power to you, really, because we need more allies who aren't necessarily in the groups. Like, you're really, really vital for change, because if you do have people who are, say, in the ball pits of familiarity and stuff, sometimes it takes a person who looks like the other person to say, hey, this might not be right, which sucks, but like, it's one of those like really minor stepping stones, for example. So luckily at Ogilvy this is not an issue at all, but if it's the case that you may feel like this needs to be a leap or something, it might just take you first, because sometimes like your voice can help And that's what I think true allyship is being willing to listen, being willing to research, and to actually help elevate and support your fellow colleagues in what way you can, because you might have, say, a unique privilege that we don't. And I say, well, you should use your privilege for good, sort of thing.
Definitely. Oh, well, thank you all so much. That was such a wide-ranging and honest conversation. I really enjoyed it. So a huge thank you. Follow along on the @ByteTrends Twitter to find out more about Byte Live 2020, catch the latest sessions, and read exclusive takeaways from the week's discussions. Have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you very much.